Some stories are imagined. Others are remembered. This one was real. Case 0, True Files, where the truth is darker than fiction. The Tallahatchie River doesn't speak, but it remembers. On an August morning in 1955, a body was pulled from its waters, beaten, disfigured, and tied with barbed wire to a 75-pound cotton gin fan. The boy was 14. His name was Emmett Till. He had come down from Chicago to visit family in Mississippi, to spend the summer with cousins, to laugh, to live, to be a child. But that river carried something more than a body. It carried a truth that America didn't want to face, and a lie that protected those who killed him. The world would remember his name. But not everyone would remember what they said to make him disappear. In a small grocery store in Money, Mississippi, a white woman claimed that a black boy had grabbed her hand and made advances. Her name was Carolyn Bryant. Her accusation, whether whispered in fear or malice, set off a chain of events that ended in murder. Days later, Emmett Till was abducted, tortured, and killed by her husband Roy Bryant and his half-brother, J.W. Millam. They stood trial. An all-white, all-male jury found them not guilty after just 67 minutes. And for decades, Carolyn Bryant's story, her lie, remained untouched, written into the record as truth. She lied to investigators. She lied to the FBI. And that lie helped shield 2 confessed killers from justice for more than half a century. But history has a way of catching up. In 2008, long after the world had changed, she finally admitted what many already knew: nothing that boy did could ever justify what happened to him. The truth was buried, but not forever. Because the river still remembers. If you believe stories like this should never be forgotten, like, comment, and subscribe for more. It was 1955, a time when looking the wrong person in the eye could cost you your life. The South was ruled not by law, but by custom, a code of silence, of deference, of survival. Signs marked every doorway, every fountain, every bus seat, reminders that black and white were never meant to mix. In Mississippi, that code wasn't written down. It was understood. If you were black, you didn't speak too loud. You didn't challenge a white man's word. You didn't question the unspoken rules that said your life was worth less. And if you did, there would be consequences. That summer, the cotton fields of the Delta stretched endlessly beneath the sun. People picked, prayed, and tried to stay invisible. But on one train from Chicago, a boy was heading south, not to pick cotton, not to work, but to see family. He had no idea the world waiting for him was built to break him. His name was Emmett Lewis Till. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago, bright, curious, talkative. He loved jokes. He loved baseball. He stuttered when he got excited, but covered it by whistling softly through his teeth, a habit that made everyone smile. He was raised by his mother, Mamie Till Mobley, a woman who worked hard, loved fiercely, and taught her son that he was just as good as anyone else. That summer, Emmett begged her to let him visit his cousins in Money, Mississippi, a tiny town most people had never heard of. He packed his clothes neatly, tucked his father's ring into his pocket, and promised his mother he'd behave. Be careful, she told him. Be respectful. And if you have to, bow your head and say yes, ma'am. She kissed him goodbye at the train station. He was 14, grinning, confident, full of life. When she waved him off, Mamie didn't know it would be the last time she'd ever see her son alive. If this story already has your heart, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps keep history visible. August 24, 1955. It was just another hot evening in Money, Mississippi, a crossroads town with one gas pump, one cotton gin, and one small store that sold everything from candy to kerosene. That store was called Bryant's Grocery and Meat Market. It was owned by Roy Bryant and his wife, Carolyn, a 21-year-old white woman who worked the counter when her husband was away. That night, Emmett Till walked in with his cousins to buy candy and a drink. The boys were laughing, showing off, city kids from Chicago who didn't know, or didn't believe, how different Mississippi really was. What happened next depends on who you ask. Some said Emmett whistled as he left the store, a quick, nervous sound, the way he did when he stuttered. Others said he meant it as a joke, a bit of teenage bravado. Carolyn Bryant told a different story. She said he grabbed her hand, asked her for a date, and made lewd advances. But the truth is simpler and crueler. Every eyewitness who was there, including Emmett's cousin Simeon Wright, said he never touched her. He bought his candy, gave a playful whistle, and walked out the door. That was it. A whistle. A sound that lasted less than a second, but echoed for decades. Inside the store, Carolyn was humiliated, not because of what had happened, but because of who might have seen it. A white woman shamed in public. A black boy accused of disrespect. In 1955 Mississippi, that was enough to start a hunt. The next day, the story began to twist. By nightfall, whispers filled the Delta that a boy from Chicago had flirted with a white woman. That he had talked fresh. That he had crossed the line. Each retelling made it worse. By the time it reached Roy Bryant, the truth was gone. He was furious, humiliated, convinced that someone had made a fool of his wife, and by extension, of him. He gathered his half-brother, J.W. Millam, a man with a temper and a reputation for violence. Together, they planned to teach the boy a lesson. For 3 days, they waited. Then, just after midnight on August 28th, a pickup truck pulled onto a dark dirt road outside the Wright family's home. A voice called from the darkness, "Which one of you is the boy from Chicago?" When Emmett stepped forward, they took him. And the lie that started in a small-town grocery store became the excuse for murder. Like, comment, and subscribe for more true crime stories that history tried to erase. Every engagement helps these voices be heard again. August 28th, 1955. It was past 2 in the morning when headlights crawled down a dirt road outside the home of Mose Wright, Emmett's great-uncle. The family had been asleep. Crickets. Then the sound of tires on gravel. 2 white men stepped out, Roy Bryant and his half-brother, J.W. Millam. One carried a flashlight. The other, a .45 caliber pistol. They knocked hard on the wooden door. "Which one of you is the boy from Chicago?" The house froze. Mose Wright, 64, stood shaking as the men demanded to see the boy who had done the talking at Bryant's store. Emmett came out of the room wearing his pajamas. He admitted he was the one. They ordered him to get dressed. Wright begged them not to take him, offered them money, pleaded that he was just a child. Millam answered, "Don't worry. We just want to teach him a lesson." They led Emmett out into the darkness. The truck door slammed. And the night swallowed the sound. Subscribe to Case Zero for more, because some stories should never fade into silence. And that was the last time anyone in his family ever saw him alive. 3 days later, a boy fishing along the Tallahatchie River saw something floating near the bank. It looked like a bundle of clothes, until it drifted closer. Sheriff's deputies came. They pulled the body from the water. It was Emmett Till. His face was unrecognizable, beaten beyond recognition, a bullet hole through his head. Around his neck was barbed wire, twisted tight and tied to a 75-pound cotton gin fan used to weigh him down. The only thing that could still identify him was his father's ring, the gold signet engraved with the initials LT, for Lewis Till. The world had not yet seen what hate looked like, but soon it would. If this part of the story moves you, help others hear it, like, comment, and subscribe so the truth keeps reaching new eyes. When Emmett's body was returned to Chicago, the authorities advised his mother not to open the casket. They said it would be too gruesome, too painful, too much. But Mamie Till Mobley refused to look away. She said, "Let the world see what they did to my boy." More than 100,000 people came to his funeral at Robert's Temple Church of God in Christ. Jet magazine published photographs of Emmett's mutilated face, and for the first time, America saw what racial hatred looked like when the lies were stripped away. The images ignited something that could not be silenced. A mother's grief had become a movement. Subscribe to Case Zero for more stories that changed history, and the voices brave enough to tell them. September 1955. Just weeks after Emmett Till was buried, his killers stood trial in Sumner, Mississippi. The courthouse was packed, white men fanning themselves in the front rows, reporters pressed against the walls, and a handful of black spectators seated in the back. Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam were charged with murder. Their wives sat behind them, smiling. The jury was all white, all male. Not one black person was allowed to serve. Over 5 days of testimony, witness after witness took the stand. Emmett's great-uncle Mose Wright, who rose slowly from his seat and pointed to the men who had taken his nephew in the night. That moment, an elderly black man accusing 2 white men in a Mississippi courtroom, was nothing short of revolutionary. But the truth didn't matter there. The defense claimed the body pulled from the river wasn't Emmett Till at all, that he was alive somewhere in Chicago. The jury nodded. They laughed. They smoked. They were never going to convict their own. After just 67 minutes of deliberation, they returned a verdict, not guilty. If the courage of Mose Wright deserves to be remembered, like this video and subscribe for more, so history never fades into comfort. During the trial, Carolyn Bryant took the stand and repeated her story. She swore that Emmett Till had grabbed her hand, asked her out, and spoken words no white woman should ever hear from a black boy. The courtroom hung on her every word. Her husband smiled. The jury believed her. What they didn't know, what the world wouldn't learn for decades, was that none of it was true. Emmett Till never touched her, never threatened her, never said the things she claimed. But her words became the shield that protected his killers. In Mississippi in 1955, the word of a white woman was absolute, and a black child's life was expendable. 2 weeks after the verdict, Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam walked free. No handcuffs. No remorse. The following year, they sold their confession to Look magazine for $4,000. In that article, they admitted what they had done, how they beat him, shot him, and dumped his body into the river. They knew they could never be tried again. Double jeopardy protected them. The law had done its part. The system had closed its eyes. Subscribe to Case Zero, because the past still speaks, and we refuse to let it whisper in silence. The truth was out there now, printed in a national magazine for everyone to see, and still, nothing changed. It was an open secret the world chose to live with. Justice wasn't just denied. It was mocked. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that show how truth survives even when justice fails. Decades passed. The men who killed Emmett Till lived their lives openly, working, raising families, and dying without ever serving a day in prison. The case went cold, sealed under dust and silence. But history has a way of circling back. In 2008, more than 50 years after the murder, historian Timothy Tyson sat across from Carolyn Bryant, the woman whose accusation had started it all. She was 80 years old then, frail, reflective, unguarded. In that interview, she admitted what many had always known. Her story was false. She said, "That part's not true. Emmett Till never touched her. He never grabbed her. He never threatened her." She confessed that she couldn't remember the exact words she had said in court. But the damage had already been done, sealed into the trial record, printed in newspapers, taught as truth. One sentence had cost a child his life. And a lifetime later, the woman who spoke it said she couldn't remember why. Subscribe to Case Zero to uncover the lies history tried to bury. Every new viewer helps these truths resurface. When her words resurfaced, the world demanded answers. The Department of Justice reopened the case in 2004, then again in 2018, hoping that the confession might lead to new charges. The FBI interviewed witnesses, re-examined old evidence, and even searched the basement of a courthouse in Mississippi, where an unserved 1955 arrest warrant for Carolyn Bryant was discovered. But in the end, the Bureau closed the case once more. They called it insufficient evidence. No new indictments were filed. No one was held accountable. The killers were dead. And the woman whose lie began it all died in 2023, never charged, never punished. But history kept its own file. Every photograph, every transcript, every word she said, preserved, studied, remembered. Because the truth has a longer life than those who bury it. If this story matters to you, like, comment, and subscribe. Help keep the record alive. When Emmett Till was murdered, the world saw it as another tragedy in the South. But to many, especially the Black Americans, it became something more, a turning point. Just 3 months after his death, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus. When asked what gave her the courage, she said, "I thought of Emmett Till." From that moment, the modern civil rights movement began to take shape. Rallies, boycotts, marches, voices rising where silence once reigned. His mother, Mamie Till Mobley, devoted her life to speaking his name, telling his story, and demanding justice that never came. And yet, in her voice, in every mother who has ever lost a child to hate, the movement found its heartbeat. From one coffin came a movement that shook a nation. A boy who just wanted to visit his cousins became the face of America's reckoning with itself. Subscribe for more stories that show how one life can change the course of history, and how remembering is its own form of justice. Carolyn Bryant Donham died in 2023. No jury ever convicted her. No judge ever questioned her under oath about that night in 1955. She lived a long, quiet life, far from the cameras, far from the questions. But history never forgot her silence. Some lies echo louder than the truth. And in her silence, generations learned the sound of injustice, not the shout of hate, but the calm of indifference. Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam boasted of their Crime to Look magazine in 1956. They said they had no regrets. Their grandchildren live in a world where the story of Emmett Till is taught in schools, printed in textbooks, carved into memorials. But the river still runs through Mississippi, quiet, heavy, carrying the memory of what was done there. And the nation still carries what that lie cost us all. Nearly 70 years after Emmett Till's death, in 2022, the President of the United States signed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, making lynching a federal crime for the first time in American history. It came too late for Emmett. Too late for Mamie, who died in 2003 never seeing her son's murderers face justice. But not too late for the generations who continue to speak his name. Across America, memorials now stand where his body was found, where the trial took place, where his mother prayed. Children visit those places and ask, why? And maybe that's the question that keeps history alive. Not what happened, but how could it happen, and what will we do to stop it from happening again? If you believe stories like this still matter, subscribe to Case Zero, and help make sure they're never forgotten. Emmett Till was 14 years old. He didn't know he would become a symbol. He didn't ask to be one. But through his mother's courage, through the voices that refused to be silenced, he became a mirror, forcing America to look at itself. His story began in a small store in Mississippi, but it never ended there. It lives in every march for justice, in every voice that demands truth, in every river that still remembers. Because the truth doesn't die with the people who bury it. It rises, again and again, in the stories we choose to tell. And this one began with a lie. Subscribe for more stories that were never meant to be forgotten. Case Zero, True Files. Every truth has a beginning.